He found the letter wedged between junk mail. No return address, no stamp, just his name written in handwriting he hadn't seen in 41 years. And when he opened it, 5 words changed everything. "You didn't finish the job." He stared at the page for a long time, fingers trembling slightly. Not because he didn't understand what it meant, but because he did. Mark Ellison had spent 2 decades erasing that part of his life. Now, with one cryptic note, it had returned like a whisper from a grave he thought he'd buried years ago. "Welcome to Echo Stories, where we uncover the lives of people the world forgot to remember. The ones who served in silence, disappeared without ceremony, and carried their secrets all the way into the quiet corners of retirement." If this story grabs you, subscribe and stay with us, because today you're about to meet a man who thought his past was dead until it knocked on his door. Mark lived alone in a modest single-story home in Port Townsend, Washington, the kind of place people came to disappear in peace, a sleepy waterfront town with antique bookstores, sea salt in the air, and a population that respected privacy without asking questions. He kept a tidy yard, shopped at the same corner market every Wednesday, and volunteered at the local boat museum twice a month. To everyone who knew him, he was a kind, quiet retiree. A former logistics consultant, he had told them. Nothing fancy. He liked to fish, liked crossword puzzles, didn't own a smartphone. He had no online presence, no family, no history that could be found with a simple search. And that was exactly how he liked it. Each morning, Mark brewed his coffee in the same dented stovetop pot he'd carried through 3 continents. He read a physical newspaper. He made notes in a leather-bound notebook no one ever saw. He took long walks at dawn, avoided cameras, and never spoke about anything that happened before 1991. His house was clean but sparse. No photos, no trophies, just a radio, a telescope, and a worn-out military duffel bag tucked deep in the back of his closet. Inside it, a rusted dog tag with no serial number, a single bullet casing, and a piece of torn fabric with a bloodstain the time hadn't completely erased. Mark didn't believe in ghosts, but he lived like one. The letter arrived on a Thursday. It was sandwiched between a gardening catalog and an ad for hearing aids, but it wasn't mailed, just placed there. No stamp, no postmark, just his name written in clean, deliberate cursive. He carried it inside without thinking, tossed the rest of the mail on the kitchen counter, sat down at the table, opened it, 1 sentence. "You didn't finish the job." He didn't need to ask which job. There had only ever been one. He read it again, and a 3rd time, as if more words might appear, but it stayed the same. 5 words that hit harder than any bullet he'd ever dodged. A challenge, a threat, a reminder. He felt the familiar surge, that old heat in his chest, the one that used to come right before everything went sideways. He got up, locked the door, checked the windows, drew the shades, walked into the garage and opened the tool chest he hadn't touched in nearly 15 years. Underneath the screwdrivers and wrenches was a sealed plastic case. He opened it, hands steady now. Inside, an old encrypted flash drive, a folded piece of paper with a sequence of 10-digit codes, and a burner phone with no contacts. He plugged in the flash drive to the laptop he kept offline. Waited. The screen lit up. No welcome, no password. Just one line. "If you're reading this, they found you." Mark leaned back in his chair, the tight knot in his spine tightening further. This wasn't a prank. It wasn't paranoia. It was protocol. That phrase, "they found you," was part of a failsafe built by a man he once trusted with his life. If it ever appeared, it meant someone had breached their ghost protocol. Someone was either looking for Mark, or worse, watching him already. He opened the drawer beside him and took out a small notebook with a black elastic strap. Inside, he had handwritten contingency plans for 3 possible scenarios: relocation, confrontation, and counter-surveillance. Each page was marked with color-coded tabs. He flipped to red. Red meant stay put, observe, confirm. First, he needed to know if he was being watched. He checked the outside perimeter. No fresh footprints near the window. No unfamiliar cars on the street. No interference on the landline. But that didn't mean anything. Whoever sent the letter had gotten close enough to touch his mailbox without being seen. He didn't sleep that night. Just sat in the living room chair, lights off, listening. At 2:34 a.m., he heard a faint click from the backyard. Not a footstep. Not an animal. A camera shutter. He didn't move. By 3 a.m., it was silent again. But the damage was done. By sunrise, Mark knew he had to make contact. He booted up the burner phone. It hadn't been used in 16 years. He sent a coded message to a number no longer listed in any network. The message was short. Status compromised. Activating mirror. Within 90 seconds, a reply. Run it. No attachments. He burned the paper with the original codes, deleted the message logs, packed a bag with only the essentials, a change of clothes, a single photograph of a man standing near a crumbling building, and a folded metro ticket from Budapest, dated 1987. By the time the town was waking up, Mark had already disappeared. But whoever had sent that letter, they were counting on that. Mark drove for hours, avoiding highways, cameras, and any place he might be recognized. He stopped only for gas, paying in cash, eyes scanning for anything out of place. Eventually, he pulled into a deserted parking lot behind an abandoned diner near the Washington-Idaho border. It was one of the old safe drop sites, places nobody used anymore, except ghosts who had no one left to call. He parked, got out, and walked to the alley behind the building. On the brick wall, a small section of graffiti had been marked with a white X fresh. That meant someone had been here. Recently, he slid his fingers under the rusted metal panel just beneath it. Inside was a folded envelope and a single Polaroid photo. The envelope had no writing. The photo showed a man, late 60s, Middle Eastern, standing outside a small shop. Behind him, a sign read, Sarin Market, open 24/7. The timestamp was 2 days old. Location, Detroit. Mark stared at the image. His jaw clenched. He knew the man. The last time he'd seen him, they were both bleeding in the back of a cargo van crossing into Turkey. The man's name was Jalil Farhani. Back then, he was an asset, a tech engineer turned informant deep inside a chemical weapons ring. Mark's final assignment had been to extract him from northern Iraq in 1988. He had succeeded, or so he'd thought. He returned to his car and opened the envelope. Inside was a printed message. The font was serif, standard government typeface, the kind used in field briefings and intelligence memos. It read, Asset F compromised, active in CONUS operation. Echo, incomplete. You are the last node. There was no signature, no seal, just 3 lines. Enough to send a chill through every nerve in Mark's body. Operation Echo. That name hadn't been spoken aloud in over 3 decades. It was supposed to be sealed, burned, buried. Only 5 people had full knowledge of its scope. 2 were dead. 1 was in exile. 1 had disappeared. And the 5th was Mark. He reached into his glove compartment and pulled out a map, circled a point just outside Detroit. Then he started driving. He arrived at nightfall, parking 3 blocks from the market. It was a rundown corner store with faded signage and a neon light that flickered intermittently. Mark waited, watching. A boy on a bike passed. A couple argued near a bus stop. No cameras on the streetlight. That was good. At 11:17 p.m., the shop door opened. The man in the photo stepped out, locking up. Same walk, same posture. But his hair was thinner, face a bit heavier. Still unmistakable. Mark followed on foot, staying 2 car lengths behind. Through the alleys, past a bakery, into a side street with no lights. Then the man stopped. Without turning, he spoke. You're not as quiet as you used to be. Mark froze, then replied, And you're not as dead as I was told. Jalil turned slowly. His face bore a crooked smile. I should be, he said. But someone left a crack open. Thought maybe it was time to crawl through. They sat in the back of an old diner, closed for renovations. Jalil had keys. Mark didn't ask how. Between sips of bitter coffee, the truth came out. Jalil had never stopped working. After the operation, he had been relocated, reclassified, and then recruited again, not by the agency, but by a breakaway cell that splintered off during the early 90s. A black unit operating off books, supposedly dissolved after budget cuts and political fallout. But it hadn't dissolved. It had gone deep. Mark had heard rumors, rogue intelligence operations, dark funding, the kind of stuff that got buried before it reached a Senate hearing. But he never imagined Jalil was part of it. Now, that unit wanted to finish what Operation Echo had started. weaponization of certain data protocols Jalil had once accessed. But he had refused, walked away, hid in plain sight, until someone found him again. "They won't stop," Jalil said. "Not until they erase every piece of this." "Why me?" Mark asked. "Why the letter?" Jalil looked at him carefully. "Because you're the only one who ever did the job clean. And because your name still scares them." Mark leaned back. His fingers tapped slowly against the ceramic cup. "I don't scare anyone anymore." "Then maybe they think you have nothing to lose." The silence stretched. Finally, Mark spoke. "What do they want?" "Proof. Records, testimonies. They want to burn the last traces." "I have it all." "And you're just handing it over?" "No, I'm asking you to bury it." They drove to a small storage facility on the edge of town. Jalil unlocked a unit, revealing a single metal case inside a mini freezer. Inside, tapes, photos, a ledger, and a memory card sealed in a vacuum pack. "This is everything. Burn it, bury it, vanish with it. I don't care. Just don't let it fall back into their hands." Mark took the case. As they exited, headlights flashed from across the street. A black SUV, tinted windows. Mark didn't hesitate. He shoved Jalil behind the dumpster, drew a weapon he hadn't used in over a decade, and fired a single shot at the SUV's tire. The vehicle jerked, reversed, then sped off. No plates. They didn't go back to the diner. They didn't talk for the next 2 hours. They just drove. At sunrise, Mark pulled into a remote trailhead in northern Michigan. He opened the trunk, looked at the case, then turned to Jalil. "If I do this, they'll come for both of us." "They already are." Mark stared at the forest. The trees stretched like silent witnesses. He grabbed a shovel. "I'll need 12 feet. Jalil blinked. "That deep?" "If someone wants to find it, they'll have to deserve it." Later that day, Mark booked a motel under a fake name, burned the envelope, the map, and every trace of the meeting. Then he powered up the burner phone one last time. One message. Echo buried. Final node silent. He removed the SIM, crushed it under his boot, and flushed the remains. But he knew it wasn't over. Not yet. Mark didn't return home. He knew better. Knew that silence was safer when it was complete. For 2 weeks he moved like a shadow, across state lines, through back roads and small towns, always one step ahead of whatever eyes might still be watching. He checked into nameless motels under different aliases. He avoided patterns, avoided people, but he didn't feel safe. Not yet. He kept thinking about the letter, about who sent it. It wasn't Jalil. That was clear now. The man had been in hiding, not hunting, and whoever had followed them to the storage unit wasn't local muscle. Their timing was too precise, their exit too clean. Professionals. Which meant only one thing. Someone from the inside was still active, still pulling strings. The thought clawed at Mark's mind. Not fear. He had long since learned to live without that, but a sense of unfinished business, the same way a soldier knows the sound of an incomplete click on a rifle. Something was out of place, and it had his name on it. One night, in a motel outside Duluth, Mark found an old contact, a digital ghost named Wren, a surveillance tech who used to operate out of Prague. No phone calls, no emails, just a single forum post on an encrypted board, phrased like a book review. 12 hours later, he got a knock on the door. A woman, early 40s, long coat, mirrored sunglasses even at night. "You're either desperate," she said, "or very stupid." "Both," Mark replied. She stepped in. They didn't use names. He handed her a sketch of the SUV, description of the timing, the code from the original flash drive. She studied the notes, then pulled out a tablet and began typing. 10 minutes passed in silence before she spoke. "This isn't new," she said. "This is reactivated. Whoever's doing this isn't just cleaning up. They're looking for something." Mark frowned. "Looking for what?" She turned the screen toward him. A profile appeared. It was old, blurry, but the face was familiar. Mark's face, but younger. Clean cut, CIA issued. "Deceased, 1993. He stared at the screen. "They burned that file." Wren shook her head. "Apparently not. Someone pulled it from archive storage last month and rerouted it to a new clearance level." "Who?" She hesitated. "You're not going to like it. Try me." She tapped the screen again. A name appeared. Douglas Hart. Mark's mouth tightened. That was the man who recruited him, trained him, and ultimately tried to eliminate him. Back in 1993, during the last months of Operation Echo, Hart had gone rogue. He wanted to use the asset data, chemical weapon research, encryption prototypes, blackmail material, as leverage. He believed in the cause, just not the rules. Mark had refused to help. Their final mission together ended in a standoff outside Ankara gunfire, a broken comms line, and a body that was never found until now. If Hart was alive and pulling strings, it meant Echo was never really shut down, just hidden, repurposed. And now it was waking up again. Mark left Wren with a nod and a nonverbal agreement. If either of them went dark, the other would know what it meant. 3 days later, Mark arrived in Wyoming. A quiet valley, no cell towers, one house. It belonged to Hart's sister, a former intelligence linguist turned goat farmer. He didn't knock, just waited by the fence. Eventually she came out, looked him over, said nothing. He raised an eyebrow. "Is he here?" She nodded. "He's sick," she said, "but not sorry." Mark followed her inside. Hart was in a chair by the fireplace, a blanket over his legs, his face gaunt, his hands trembling, but his eyes still sharp. "Hello, Mark," he rasped. "You always were dramatic." Hart coughed a laugh. "And you were always loyal to the wrong people." Mark sat. "No pleasantries then?" Hart asked. "You tried to kill me? You tried to stop me?" Mark leaned forward. "What do you want?" Hart stared into the flames. "They're going to finish what we started," he said. "Echo's awake now, not like before. No handlers, no oversight, just results. I buried it." "I know. That's why they'll come for you." "Already have." Hart turned to him. "Then you know what you have to do." Mark didn't answer. He left that night, didn't look back. 2 days later, the cabin burned to the ground. The fire marshal's report said faulty wiring, no survivors listed, no body recovered. Mark didn't ask questions because he already knew. Today, if you go to a veterans memorial in a small town in Idaho, you'll find a brass plaque on a stone bench. No name, no rank, just a quote. "Some jobs never end. Some men just stop answering the phone." Locals say an old man used to sit there every Thursday at 7 a.m., drink black coffee and read the newspaper backward. He hasn't been seen in months, but sometimes when it's quiet, a folded letter appears on the bench. No envelope, just 5 words. "You didn't finish the job." Some ghosts never disappear. They just wait, in silence, for the world to remember why they were created. Mark Ellison lived in the margins of history. He didn't seek justice. He didn't want revenge. He just wanted to disappear on his own terms. And sometimes, that's the most heroic thing of all. If this story stayed with you, subscribe to Echo Stories. Let's keep these whispers alive.